Today we're going to talk about Candlemas. Candlemas is a feast day in the Catholic Church which celebrates the presentation of Christ in the temple. And the tradition has it that back in the late 5th century, the Pope offered crepes free to pilgrims who came to Rome. And this tradition was carried back to France. And on this day, February 2nd, the French typically eat crepes for dinner. And it's not actually what we think of as crepes. It's a galette, which is a crepe, but it's made with buckwheat flour and filled with delicious savory fillings. And these traditionally come from Brittany. Today we're going to make both savory galettes and we're going to make sweet or dessert crepes. So let's get started. We're going to start with the batter for the galettes or the savory crepes. And I've got a cup of milk and 1 egg at room temperature. Both are at room temperature. Using ingredients at room temperature helps them to blend together better. So I always try to think ahead and get this out earlier in the day. So I'm going to whisk that together. My family and I, we love crepes and galettes, and we have them year-round, but I always try to make them for Candlemas. And then I've got 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter, which I've let cool down so it doesn't curdle my egg. I'm going to whisk that in. I've got just a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Like I said, these are savory crepes. There's no sugar in it. And 3/4 cup of buckwheat flour. Now, if you don't have buckwheat flour or you don't like the taste, you can substitute whole wheat flour. I typically would do half whole wheat flour and half all-purpose flour if I were going to do that. And now we're going to whisk in our flour and get that all mixed up. And then we're going to put this in the fridge and we're going to let it come together basically in the fridge for at least 2 to 3 hours. And then I bring it out well before supper time so I can let it come up to room temperature. So that's how easy it is to make galette batter. And you'll notice it looks very thin. It will get a little thicker as the buckwheat flour absorbs the milk and egg, but you don't want thick crepe batter or you're going to end up with flat pancakes, which is what people think crepes are. But crepes are actually an unleavened pancake, meaning no baking powder, no baking soda, anything like that. So it's already getting thicker. I'm going to go ahead and put this in the fridge. I'm going to prepare the fillings for our galettes. So I'm going to do 2 kinds of galettes. The first is going to be a chicken. We had a roasted chicken last night, so I have the leftover chicken. I diced it up and it's still got a little bit of the juices in there. Definitely want to use those. It's packed with flavor. And then I've got some grated Gruyere. I've got some shallots that I'm going to caramelize in 2 tablespoons of butter. And then I have some mushrooms sauteed left over from the night before last when we had pizza. And I'm going to use some chicken stock and a little bit of cream to create a sauce for the chicken ones. And I also have some fresh tarragon and some fresh thyme. Now the other one is going to be an egg and ham galette. I had this for the first time in Paris and I really liked it a lot. And then I kind of forgot about it for years until my husband and I went to Quebec. And we were at the outdoor market and we found this little outdoor stall making crepes on the spot, fresh to order. And we got the egg and ham one and it was so delicious. So I'm going to try to recreate that. So I've got some ham. Now normally I would buy jambon de Paris, very hard to get. So I just got some maple wood smoked and I sliced it into some thin strips. I got a couple of eggs. I've got 2 tablespoons of butter and 2 tablespoons of flour. I'm going to make a roux to create a bechamel sauce with some milk and cream and some salt and pepper. And then I've got some fresh chives that are going to get sprinkled on that. So everything is ready to go. I'm going to get cooking. I'm going to make the sauce for our chicken, which is really more of a gravy. I've got 2 tablespoons of butter melted. I'm going to start this out just like I did the bechamel. So once the butter is melted, stir in 2 tablespoons of flour. Typically your roux has equal amounts of flour and fat. And you want to cook this for about 1 to 2 minutes for 2 reasons. Most importantly, you want to cook out that raw flour taste. Second of all, you want this to darken just a little. It'll give a little more depth of flavor to our gravy. So I'm going to let that cook down for a little bit. In the bechamel, I put a little bit of chicken stock at the beginning to accomplish 2 things. Number 1, it's a great way to not get lumps. If you just put a little bit in at a time, incorporate it completely, you will get a smooth bechamel sauce with no lumps, and you can use the chicken stock right out of the refrigerator or the cupboard, and the same with your cream. Contrary to popular belief, it does not have to be warmed up if you use this method of adding just a little liquid at a time until it's basically absorbed in, and you just keep doing that until you get a very thick sauce. And then at this point for the bechamel, I would start adding cream, but this is going to be more of a gravy for our chicken, so I'm just going to keep stirring in broth a little bit at a time. I've incorporated about a 1/2 cup of the chicken stock so far. I am using unsalted chicken stock. I like to control the sodium myself, and also for this particular gravy, you can see that's nice and smooth. This particular gravy, I'm going to fortify it with about a tablespoon of the chicken bouillon paste. This really brings depth of flavor. It's a quickie shortcut for when you're trying to do a sauce or a gravy that tastes like it's cooked for hours, but really has only taken you 10 or 15 minutes to make. And it also brings a lovely, slightly golden color to our sauce. So that's a little too thick to put onto our galettes. I'm going to add just a little more chicken stock and then cook it down and set it aside. The gravy has cooked down considerably. It's a much better consistency. I'm going to give it a little taste, especially for the salt level. With the addition of that bouillon paste, you don't need to add any salt. I am going to add just a little bit of pepper. And this is ready too, so I'm going to set this aside until we're ready to make our galettes. The first galette I'm going to do is the ham and egg. And you need to have everything ready to rock and roll on this one because it's going to be assembled in the pan. So moving on to the galettes, and I'm going to do a quick saute of the ham so that it doesn't go into the galette cold. Just a little bit of butter. And I actually made the dessert crepes first. Those are fine at room temperature, whereas the galettes, you want to get them made, filled with your hot fillings, and serve them up right away. So, using the same pan, of course. And I did thin out the galette batter with a little milk as well. So we got the ham warm, that's all I'm really shooting for. A little color doesn't hurt, gives it a little crispiness, but it's really just to get it warmed up. So again, a ladle full of the batter. And you can see it's a much different color than the dessert crepe. I'm going to just roll it out again. If you put too much in, just get it out to the sides. And you actually want that for this galette because the egg's going to go in there. So I want to build up a little side on here. let it set, and then I do that again just to not get one thick spot. Okay, we're going to let that cook and flip it in about 30 seconds. The galette is ready to flip. This is quite delicate, more delicate than the crepe. And work fast now. We're going to sprinkle on some of our ham. And we got our egg already in a bowl. We're going to put that on. And the reason you want to have this ready is so that this has time to cook the egg before the galette gets too browned. You can leave the egg as is if you want. I don't care much for super runny yolk, so I'm giving it a little poke, and I'm just going to get it to spread a bit. And then we just want to cook it till that egg looks ready to go. Give it a little bit of salt. And a little bit of pepper. You can see the white is starting to set. You can use your fork to spread that a little. You don't want to go too far out because this is going to get folded up, but if we take it out, the egg will cook. And because the edges of the crepe tend to cook the fastest, we're actually going to fold this in a little. No, not quite ready. Get some of that egg over here. I want the egg and the ham kind of spread out, so you get that in every bite. Okay, so we're going to start folding this in. I'm going to make sort of a little pocket. Oh, we got a leak, but that's all right. Nothing's perfect. I'm going to hold that down while I get this last side. There we go. Get that over. I'll just give that a minute for the egg to finish cooking, and then we will plate this. Our first galette is done, and you can see the egg is set, but it's still soft. Got a little crispy edge on the galette, and now we're going to give it a little bit of this bechamel that we made earlier. And then we're going to give it a sprinkle of our chives. Chives go well because they're often used with egg dishes like in omelets and things. And then a little bit of fresh basil too. Just gives it a little more brightness. And that is galette number 1. Looks delicious. To go with our galettes, I'm going to make a simple French style salad, and I'm going to start with the vinaigrette. I've got some Dijon mustard, and I'm just going to have just a half a teaspoon. Smells delicious. And to that, I'm going to whisk in 3 tablespoons. You can use either white wine vinegar or champagne vinegar. I've got a half a teaspoon of fresh chopped garlic. Now normally I would put finely diced chives in here, but to tie this into the crepes, I've got a combination 1/4 teaspoon of the fresh chives diced up very fine, and 1/4 teaspoon of the tarragon. So this will tie it to both of the crepes. And then I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. And 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. I typically use kosher salt or sea salt. In this case, it's kosher. whisk that all up. And then I'm going to drizzle in olive oil. I usually use about 2 to 1 on my olive oil to vinegar ratio, so that would mean about 6 tablespoons. And if you do the step of mixing the mustard and the vinegar first for any kind of vinaigrette dressing, you'll tend to get a much better emulsified dressing. Now this might be a little tart, that is the French style, but if it's too tart for you, you can add a little bit of honey or even just some plain white sugar, although the honey would bring a little more flavor. So, the dressing's done. I don't have a lot because it's just my husband and myself. And I've got some mixed spring greens, they call it. It's all kinds of baby lettuces, and I think the package I had about 8 or 10 different kinds. I'm going to wait to dress this until right before we eat because I don't want it to all wilt. It's very delicate. So, there's our salad. How simple was that? For our second galette, I've heated up the chicken, and I'm going to spoon in just a little bit of our gravy so that the filling isn't dry. And you can see the juice of the chicken is mixing in there with the gravy. I'm going to toss our lettuce with a little bit of that vinaigrette. You don't want to overdress the salad. The dressing is meant to be a complement, not to take over the dish. All right, our second galette is hot out of the pan. I'm going to start with the cheese. We want to put the cheese on first because then the hot ingredients will melt the cheese. And then we're going to put on the chicken that I mixed with a little bit of the gravy just to keep it moist. And then we've got some of the mushrooms from pizza night. These actually were sauteed in a little marsala, but you don't have to do that. And then a bit of the caramelized onions that we did saute in the Sauvignon Blanc. Now, there's different ways to do crepes. This particular one I like to roll, and you'll see why. So it's almost like a burrito because I'm going to give it a little bit more gravy. That's our gravy with the tarragon and the fresh thyme, and then a little bit more cheese on top. That's looking beautiful. And our salad. And the nice thing about the salad, it'll help cut the richness of the crepe, especially this one. So there we have our chicken, shallot, and mushroom crepe. Enjoy. There's our chicken crepe with shallots and mushrooms. And there's our egg and ham crepe with bechamel sauce.